I hereby call to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Sunderland Select Board. The time is 6:30 p.m. on the nose. Our first order of business tonight will be to approve the minutes from our last two meetings from 6/16/25 and 5/19/25.
I motion we approve the minutes of 5/19 and 6/16.
Second?
We have a motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, 3-0. All right, moving on to new business. Our first order of new business is updates from our state senator, Joe Comerford. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Joe.
Thank you very much for allowing me to come and visit with you, talk with you for a little bit. I try to get to the communities I represent at least once every session. And, you know, I wanted to come to Sunderland because, you know, I really want to listen to what's happening for you, where you think I can do better, where I want to make some progress in this current session. Of course, I do all of this work in partnership with Natalie Blay. This is just a tremendous work. What would be best for you and the select board? I can give you a little bit of a lightning update, or you may have questions or concerns.
I think we'll probably have some questions, but we can do that at the end. If you want to give us your, update on what you've been doing, that'd be great.
Terrific. And again, thank you for your service. Local municipal government is the hardest in the world in our Commonwealth, and sometimes I wish the state didn't make it harder, and the federal government. And so that's my job, right? My job is to try to reverse that. So this session, I'm serving on a range of committees, and the work has, kicked off, I think, in pretty strong ways. We just today sent the fiscal year 26 budget to the governor. And we just recently passed a rules package, which will allow constituents much greater access to the legislature, which, I know that Natalie valued, I certainly value. And we are working on a number of other key pieces of legislation, as well as recently having passed a fair share supplemental budget. And we are also passed a deficiency supplemental, which is a regular budget that gets passed during the annual course of business. If something falls short or we need more money for some particular thing, each chamber will pass and the governor will file a deficiency. So lots of important money moving, some fair share, some core budget, and some rules reform, and then policies also are beginning to move, which is, I think, what you would expect from us. On the fair share supplemental, we focused on circuit breaker funding, which is important. Special education, I believe we need special education reform. I believe we have to do special education funding differently. Right now there's an assumed percentage, as you all know. That's wrong for every reason we can imagine, because there's not one community I represent where the assumed percentage is the actual percentage, and that means Sunderland, that wants to give your children an excellent education, pays every dollar above that assumed percentage. We have to have whole special education reform. Natalie Blay and I have a bill, the Rural Schools Bill. That's a key piece of that. And it works, of course, not only for rural schools, but also declining enrollment schools, and actually every school in the Commonwealth, because we need to do that, but it would be a key benefit. So Rep. Blay and I did, as a sidebar, have a briefing on the Rural Schools Bill, and we're moving really hard in that direction. I will say I'm really grateful to the Sunderland School Committee for their keen leadership here. In the fair supplemental, I was able to snag a little bit of money for Sunderland Elementary. I wish it could be more, but it really is a testament to your good work, to the great work of the school. That just is a sweet and beautiful place to send your kids. And, so I wanted to support that, so $50,000. The bigger money, of course, comes in special education. That's $248 million, that money. In the fiscal year 26 budget that just is being sent to the governor's, I just came in from Boston, desk today, there's numbers of gains. I will say that the federal turbulence is having an impact on us in Massachusetts. But with regard to transportation, we keep our commitment to half of Chapter 90 going out by miles only. I will say communities like Sunderland helped the state understand that the traditional Chapter 90 formula was just wrong for our people, right? We have the miles, not the people, And so now the state is really making that a consistent piece of work. We also, in the Fair Share Supplemental, put out more Chapter 90 money, half with miles only. Again, I think you should expect us to do that if we want a regionally equitable budget. We have to have that kind of rural-focused spending. We also kept the cost of police training down in the governor's base budget. She was imagining a doubling of that. We held it down to just what it is. We continued to fund things like public health. We continued a commitment to the RTAs so they can do microtransit and other inter-county transportation. There is a provision in there to have a housing production dashboard to make sure that the housing bond bill is getting expended in regionally equitable ways. And then important for us in Western Mass, there is a provision to begin cracking open what I call the Chapter 70 municipal contribution formula, because I think, as we know, in all of the communities I represent, Chapter 70, through the Student Opportunity Act, while we're spending much more money, we are not finding it, hitting home, feeling it here in Western Massachusetts, and that's because we're rural or we're declining enrollment or we're both. And we need to understand that. And so there's two sides to the formula. There's the Chapter 70, what we get in our communities, and there's the municipal contribution. So we haven't looked at Chapter 70 in a decade. We're pressing hard for that, Natalie and I are. But then there's the municipal contribution, what we're asked to contribute. We haven't looked at that in 17 years in the Commonwealth. So in the budget sent to the governor, we will reopen municipal contribution. And that's everything from the state split 59-41 to the cap put on municipal contributions of 82.5% to the collision with Prop 2.5, all of it. We'll get a hard look, and there'll be real opportunities for Sunderland to weigh in, as you may want to, right? And say, hey, it's really painful out here, and we're making horrible choices to fund our schools, right? We can't pit our firefighters against our teachers, it's not fair. And that's what's happening in small towns. And so we will keep pushing, both with money, but also with policy to help communities like Sunderland. So I think I'll pause because I just talked at you for a little bit and just take your questions and your critique and feedback, all of it.
Did you want to get started, or?
Well, I'm always curious. I'm learning more about the school funding, and I read about like other places that they do it differently, where there's more of the state kind of controls more of it, and here, obviously in Mass, it's mostly local. But is there any move to, is that basically what you're talking about, is trying to get that more equitable across all the towns?
Yeah, so looking at so there's the big money shots for schools are this. Municipal contribution, what Sunderland is asked to contribute, charter school reform, and I should tell you, I put in a charter school reform bill. And that would help the state take more responsibility for funding charters off the shoulders of the municipal governments. So municipal contribution, charter school, special education, and Chapter 70. Those are the four huge money shots that communities have. That's where the money either goes from you or should stay with you, and that's where I'm focused. So the municipal contribution, yes, in there, stipulated in the budget, is a look at the split right now. The assumed split is 59-41, with municipalities paying generally 59% of education, the state paying 41% of education. Why can't we flip that around? It would be a game changer for a community like Sunderland.
Sure.
It would be a way for the state to take more of a responsibility. But there are other ways we can look at it. So there's not just one way, and this commission will look at all the ways. And it'll have to tell the story of the high taxes we pay out here in Western Massachusetts, because we don't have as much of a commercial base, right? Our property owners are disproportionately paying for our schools. It'll show all of that. I'm really glad to have worked with Natalie on that, and gladder still that it made it through conference. And now we have to get the governor's signature on it, and then we have to make our voices heard in this process. There's stipulated local hearings. There'll be one out here, I'm sure. And well, I'm not sure of anything these days, but I will work to have one out here. And then we'll have to really raise our voices so they understand what we're facing.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I think we'd be happy to see 59% going towards the school. If that-
43%?
Well, no, I'm just saying,
45%? I would take.
out of our,
Oh, yeah, okay.
Right, but this
Yeah.
is the state-local split
Yeah.
right now.
right,
The state-local split is 59 on the municipality's shoulder, generally, 351 cities and towns,
Right.
41% on the state. So one of the things this has to look at is, why is that number, why is that the split? Can we do something different? Can we move that by several handfuls of percentages over time? You know, what can we do to relieve the burden that municipalities face?
One piece of feedback I would give you on that is one of the large drivers for our town in terms of educational expense is the health insurance of the employees at the school.
Yes.
And that needs to be taken into consideration when doing all these formulas and all these things is how volatile that industry is and how you can have a 20% increase year to year and how that can be worked into the formulas to be accounted for also.
Absolutely, and in the rural schools bill, it does, that's one of the pieces of the bill that Natalie and I filed, is about health insurance and how to help communities regulate their spiking healthcare costs. Because it is, you know, it's a budget crusher. And of course you want your people to have insurance, you know, I know that's not what you're saying, but you know, it can't go up 10 or 20% and have other things remain the same, like revenue.
So that's a good segue into another question I had, and that is that as we're all, I'm sure at this point, aware, the big beautiful bill is being pushed through the federal government. With that comes giant slashes to Medicaid, and Mass Health is largely Medicaid with our sticker on the front of it. What is the state doing to prepare for that? And when are we going to know what that is going to look like?
Well, so that's moving in the Senate right now at the U.S. Senate.
Yeah.
You know, and it was stalled through some procedural moves that I supported, trying to slow it down, get more time for people to weigh in. But it is moving again. I don't know the timing. I will say that, and we were saying this earlier, the havoc and the volatility at the federal level is absolutely having an impact in Massachusetts. I wish I could tell you it wasn't the case. It is. Our revenue is not looking as favorable as it was, and everyone is worried about the impact, for example, the research cuts, the NIH research cuts to our industries, you know, especially bioscience, and they're big taxpayers, and they're big employers.
Yeah.
And that's very scary. Out here for us, the UMass cuts are very devastating, right? So in the bill that's before the governor, it's $61 billion. It's less than the governor's bill, less than the House, less than the Senate. And it's less than that because of your question, which is what's going to happen at the federal level. So the House and the Senate and the governor didn't want to stop all business and say, you know what, what's happening in Washington is scary and volatile, and maybe we shouldn't budget, right? We should wait, but that's not tenable for our people. You need budget certainty. You can't just be arrested, right? Grants need to flow. What money we have in the state should get out because so many things have been critically cut at the federal level already. So we decided to press on, but we pressed on with a smaller budget. And that is in part to leave us some room for a declining economy, but also for a moment when, and projections are looking like there will be some cuts to Medicaid, and our people will need health insurance, or our hospitals will need to be able to deal with uninsured, right? That, we don't exactly know what it's going to look like, and we may need more shelter assistance, more food assistance. I will say though, and I say this very regretfully, that in agreeing to shave out $400 million, which is what we did in the final budget, there were things left behind. So some the Senate's number for rural schools was 16 million, and the final number is 12 million. And that's because 4 million of that went into that $400 million pot for the moment where our economy turns down and or we have federal cuts that are really threaten the livelihoods of our people. And so everything I can think of, if you saw my budget spreadsheet, everything was affected. It wasn't just Western Mass things. And that is a shame. And it is deeply mournful, right? Because we were making some significant gains in rural funding. But we're certainly not going to stop fighting. But it is having an impact, right? We've been able to forestall it a little bit with some, extra money from fair share, some surpluses over here, but it has come home in this fiscal year 26 budget.
Anything else from you guys?
I'm good right now.
One other thing we did want to also, just, you probably are well aware of this because I know Dan reaches out regularly about it, but we are moving forward with the shared use path from UMass all the way through to Park and Ride in Whately, and just want to keep reiterating that to you and to have you support that at the state level as much as you possibly can.
Your advocacy is unmatched,
Yes.
actually, and it is really terrific. And yes, count us in. You help, you've really lit this on fire. And it's great, as you know, right? When you first reached out, I said, this has to be a town priority, but knowing that it's a town priority, it is a great thing. So it's exciting, especially if you think it will be useful to Sunderland, which, of course, it will be useful for your residents, but it could be such a boon for other things as well, right?
Yeah. Well, any encouragement you can give to MassDOT to keep it moving forward, we can get through design maybe these next couple of years, and then when more money comes from the federal side, that would be great. Maybe we'll be ready for it.
We should have a catch-up meeting on it.
Okay.
Is that something that?
Sure. I mean, we're just putting the Trails grant in, so you'll get a full copy of that.
Yeah, and we have to do a letter of support.
We've done that already. I think you're good now. We'll submit it now, but if you could continue to encourage MassDOT, but we can.
Right, after it goes in. I know we
Yep.
have the sort of,
Yep.
the traditional things, but, we could have a meeting on this.
Sure, certainly, I'd love that.
So
Yep.
I can certainly work with Elaine and Corinne and Natalie on that.
Okay,
Yeah,
that'd be
it's
great.
very exciting.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, we're all very excited about the prospect of it.
Should we include the other three towns?
Oh, yeah, we definitely would want everybody, all the towns involved.
Yeah, Amherst is now involved, they reviewed the project, Deerfield and Whately are starting to give signs of support.
That's wonderful. So, I think any kind of unified meeting, that was one of the questions I had.
Yep,
So that's fabulous. Thank you for preempting that. Any kind of, if Sunderland wanted to start a conversation,
yep,
we could bring Mindy, Rep. Dom in from Amherst, right? Rep. Lake represents Whately as well, and Deerfield and you. That would be terrific. We should do that.
we could invite a MassDOT liaison, and that would be great, yeah.
Exactly, and have a conversation about it.
Yep,
I think that would be great.
All right.
If you want to follow up tomorrow, I can take that baton and help organize that.
excellent, okay.
Yeah,
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. Thank you, Joe.
Love that.
we appreciate that.
Yeah.
I have one question regarding schools. I walked in a little late, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Tom Kelly from
Oh,
Russell Street. And there used to be a lot of unfunded mandates. Now, I have been out of it for a while. Maybe they don't see as many as they used to. But are you guys going to do anything about slowing this down?
So, anyway.
The unfunded mandates for
Yeah.
schools and special ed and all these other things.
So
A
what we
little bit
just,
over the top.
what
If you're going to mandate something, you should fund it.
so what we were just talking about is, earlier, was special education funding, so you mentioned that. So I do think that special education, as it is currently calculated, leaves communities like Sunderland with costs that are above what you have. Because right now, we assume a percentage of special education students, and then every student above that, which is 16%, every student above that is paid for by the town, right, the community. And so I believe we have to count special education students like we count students who live in poverty, like we count English language learners. I think it's very simple, right? We don't take averages, we actually do a count.
Yeah.
There's some rebuttal that I've gotten from DESE over time about that, which I don't agree with, which is that if we do that, districts will use that funding to pad your budgets, their budgets. I think that's objectionable because I think the reverse is true, that families have a hard time, districts have every reason to slow the roll for 504s or IEPs because they're just expensive, right? So our families are met with resistance from districts. Districts are actually doing the reverse because of the system we have, and I think they would just simply do what they do with students who are English learners or students who are living in poverty or low income, if they simply could just count students who are receiving these services. So that is certainly, that's certainly completely and utterly objectionable. So I filed bills on that since I got into the legislature, and we have a current rural schools bill that goes right at that. And that's not a rural school only issue.
Oh, I know that.
But it does disproportionately affect us because we don't have any meat on the bone anymore. We can't cut anymore in our small towns. And so this just really affects us. We've gotten a little bit better with other kinds of unfunded mandates. For example, school meals. We're now, universally funding school meals. It's at $180 million in the budget. That's paid for by fair share money. And so that, we say we want students to have free breakfast and lunch, and we're not making districts pay for it. And I think that's good, honestly. And, could we do a better job with other things? You betcha, And I am, police reform was one of those things. So we did police reform. And both Rep. Lay and I were pretty active there. And one of the things was training, extra training for police. And Rep. Lay and I went and got that money for communities like Sunderland and all of them to be able to train their part-time officers as full-time, because that was one of the mandates. So I'm not a fan of unfunded mandates. I'm pretty critical of them. And if we do pass, it, I want to see it through. So like with police reform, I wanted to go get that money because I believe in the training for police officers. Many police officers believe in that training, but it costs something for communities, and we have to fund it. So we did do that. We also got an extra $100,000 out of, and we ran it through FERCOG for some of the Franklin County communities that were having even a harder time than just the funding for that extra training. It was called a Bridge Academy. So, yeah, I think Sunderland should hold me accountable to not abide by unfunded mandates. And if you see one, lots moves in the legislature. If you see one, you should send up a flare and say, hey, you just did this thing, and now it's costing us more money. I do pay a lot of attention to small town budgets. Like we passed public health reform, and now I pay a lot of attention to the public health money, the public health excellence grants that are moving, that are helping towns, with the state's commitment for the first time to public health. So, I think I can't make your job any harder. It's already too hard, frankly. And, money is one of the big things.
And if I can just add one more level to that, is that I do feel like the state has gotten better about recognizing when a mandate has been inadequately funded and making it right. I would love to see a more proactive effort there, where before the bill is passed, there is a study done saying, hey, what will this affect towns like Sunderland, and let's put the money up front there, because it feels much more reactive where, oh, look, we passed this 2 years down the line, towns are complaining about it, but also there's never an effort, at least from my perspective, an effort to retroactively change anything either. It's the towns were on the hook for that for 5 years before we fixed our mistake that we should have had in the first place, but there's never an effort to say, hey, you guys are out $250,000 over the last 5 years for that. We're going to now, because we're fixing our mistake, we're going to go back and we're going to pay that off also. So, to his point, I would love to see it be more proactive and also more restorative in the end of the game.
I think that's important. I think that's an important observation. I know that I've talked with, over time, with the MMA and STAM about their analysis when things are moving, being really critical, right? We don't have a legislative budget office. I think we should have one, like a congressional budget office that would do analysis for legislators. Like, what's the impact here going to be for our municipality or a particular type of person, right? A particular constituent, elderly folks, or kids, you know, like what's the long-term, short-term impact? But I agree with you that we have to be much more proactive. I'm glad you see that we've done a little bit better. I do think that we have. There's a lot more conversation about how hard it is to govern municipally because of the pressures from the federal government and the state government.
And 2.5.
And Prop 2.5,
Yeah.
which is part of this study. Part of this municipal contribution is, what the heck? How are we going to do that, right? With communities hitting their levy limit, or having to go for an override to keep pace with inflation. That's tough. And at the same time, wanting to make sure that your people can pay their taxes,
Yeah.
right? People on fixed incomes. So it's like you have the ultimate burden here, and I think that's one of the focuses of that school study that I talked about.
I mean, fundamentally, I agree with Prop 2.5, the idea that there should be a no more than 2.5% increase. I fundamentally agree with that, just it has to also work in practice also, you know.
Sure, right, but if you have health insurance going up 10%, 2.5, right? Or if, or if infrastructure costs go up 15%, right?
Yeah.
Costs, 25% more with tariffs to fix your roads, right? There's a disconnect here, which is why I think some of these, some of the ways in which we're trying to enact regional equity are more responsible on the part of the legislature.
One of the things we have discussed in the past, I'm not sure if it was with you or not, so pardon me if this is redundant, but small towns, one of the things that we struggle with is a lack of volume for purchasing. We're buying one police cruiser, one this, one that. If the state could establish a statewide municipal purchasing division or whatever, where the state buys 20,000 Tahoes or whatever it is, and then the towns can buy those from the state at cost or below cost, or however that gets worked out in a way that allows to use the state's collective bargaining, to help us, because we're talking about small towns like us. We're always negotiating for one of something, and that's never a good position to come from.
Even when we need to replace something as simple as laptops, we need 3.
Right.
We don't need 50 or 60, everything.
Yeah, but the state could buy 250,000 of them for $80 a piece or something like that, because they're buying them at bulk like that. And then, our town needs a couple more Chromebooks. Great, we order them from the state at half of what we would pay commercially. It's just that kind of a thing would be game changing for small towns like that.
That's a very good idea. That's a very good idea. I know that the Inspector General has looked at procurement and has really been very critical of how a small town even does procurement with the state's regulations. And this was because there was another town I represent that was trying to purchase a used fire truck, and it was really crazy to do that. And the Inspector General stepped in and was very helpful, and it sort of tuned him in to what municipalities go through. I think your idea of a purchasing program is a very good one. I'm happy to run that down. It's, we have DLTA, we have Division of Local Services, DLTA, and we have other things that are in that kind of back office, administration, but I have not heard of a collective purchasing program. I will say in the Rural Schools Bill, there's a back office school system, so a superintendent union. Could there be a superintendent for Franklin County? Could one person plus a few administrators do that? We don't know, but this would provide money for a study, for superintendents to get together and figure it out, right?
There is a collaborative
For
in
FERCO.
in Franklin County for
FERCO
school
has it,
purchases, and the schools also. There's a collaborative. They actually call it a collaborative that, I think it's larger than just one county. It's also in, in Hadley and Northampton.
Right. But could we do better?
Right,
Could we
right.
Would
Do
that
it
be a
larger.
Would that be a statewide thing for small schools or schools with declining enrollment? Maybe.
Yeah.
Could we have shared back office staff for HR, for accounting? Maybe. And that would take some budget strain off. I believe that if we're going to ask districts to deal with kind of pressures, we have to figure out where their safety belts are.
And in the same vein, we're talking about health insurance. We currently are part of a group of, we're part of group insurance, and so because of that, we get better rates than if we were just
Right.
bidding ourselves. Again, Massachusetts seems like a large pool. If all the Massachusetts employees, municipal employees, state employees, all of them were a group in terms of health insurance, we would not be paying as much for health insurance for all of our town employees, because again, we're, even with the dozen or so towns that we're associated with in that group, we're not getting the rates we'd be getting if we're talking about whatever 13 million people in the Commonwealth.
Agreed.
So,
Agreed. Not every community, as you know, joined the GIC.
Mhm.
I agree.
But the GIC would have been more expensive for Western Mass. And the Hampshire County Trust did analysis, and our rates were much lower than the GIC because GIC was developed in the Boston area. So there's been quite a bit of work done, I think, comparing things, but the Hampshire County Trust for years had much lower rates,
That's great.
for years
great.
and years.
That's great. And I know the GIC itself is doing some internal looking.
Yes, they've had to make a lot of adjustments too.
Right. Because it wants to be statewide.
Right.
And even it is also struggling with quite significant hikes in costs.
Can you update, I know we got the ADU law last year. Is there any updates on housing? Anything going on?
So the affordable housing bond bill is rolling out. As I mentioned, I think that there is a provision, there's a housing dashboard, if the governor signs it, that will track every dollar. So that we can see where it's being spent, what county, what municipality, for what program. I think that's really important. It was a bill I filed. Because I think we need dashboards for all state spending, because I just want to make sure that Western Mass is getting our fair share. And if I can't see it across all the programs, I'm not able to, try, right, to see all the grant programs, One Stop, MVP, all these programs that communities need. But I'm sure I missed some, right, in the 25 communities I represent. But this will be a housing dashboard. Rep. Blay and I have been talking length with HLC, Housing and Livable Communities, on their Housing Choice 2.0 program. Thanks to FERCog for its analysis, we understand that actually it doesn't work as well for Western Mass as it should. So we are pushing pretty hard together to get HLC to make sure that Housing Choices 2.0 is actually an improvement over the 1.0. HLC has some proposals for rehabilitation, which I'm interested to see, but we need new construction as well. Because we need both, we need both, we need housing of all kinds, right? So we need folks to be able to rehabilitate their home, maybe to have an elder move in with them. Who knows what's going to happen, right? So we need rehabilitation money. We need new building, and we need equitable amounts of that money. So we're in it. It is rolling out. There are some projects that are currently benefiting from pretty significant grant awards from the state. But $5 billion is a lot of money. So I'm going to want to make sure that it's equitably coming to our communities.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think the ADU stuff out here is really tough because every resident in town isn't on town sewer. So when you start looking at renovations, adding in-law apartments, things like that, you're looking at, you might not even have enough room on your property to increase your septic, things like that. So it's a wonderful idea that I can put an in-law apartment on my home, and, you know, let my elderly parents or whatever move in, but it's not even feasible to do because,
Well, it's exacerbated by most of Sunderland being in a place in terms of the water table where if you do anything with your
Yeah.
septic tank, you're having to pull it out of the ground, and it's a huge thing. And that kind of goes back to what you're talking about, unfunded mandates. That was one of the things where the state changed the regulations about how you could do septic tanks. And that falls squarely on the shoulders of residents of all of our towns, is that, well, this, when it was put in, was fine. You're telling me it's not fine now. I'm on the hook to pay $40,000 to have this
yeah, and I
big,
mean,
huge
we're
lump in my-
talking 30, 40,000. We're
That's
not,
another place where the state decided that they were gonna change the rules, but there was no money. Why wasn't there a state program where, like solar panels or heat pumps, why wasn't there a state program that said, we'll give you $20,000 towards modernizing your septic tank? I mean, that's a great example of these things where it sounds great on paper, but then, you know, in fact,
When was
The-
that passed?
That's all, it's sometime in 95.
yeah, it was quite a while ago.
But I was like, oh, I hope it wasn't
No, no.
while I was-
No, this
There is a
was
tax
a
credit, but
long
it's
time
not a
ago.
lot. It's not a lot.
But, and this is actually really, I'm glad that we're talking about this, because the effect of that is actually so far-reaching that it actually torpedoed the town's efforts to expand our sewage. Because so many people in town have been forced over the last 15 years to spend $40,000 to replace their septic tank, those people are not gonna wanna spend more money to have their town then hooked into the thing. And so because we missed this window where, like, if we'd gotten in at a certain time, we could have convinced people before a third of our town went through that process, we're now at this place where we're never gonna get the sewage to the rest of our town because all these houses have this sunken cost fallacy into their septic tanks that they'll never
and
want.
just the distance between them, you know, when you
Mm-hmm.
talk about going, you know, past a farm field and going just incredible distances with no houses, there's nobody to pitch in towards that
Yeah.
cost.
It was barely gonna be worth it if we could get buy-in from everybody because everyone, but yeah, I mean, just in our little, we live in a 90s development. A third of our neighbors have had to replace their septic tanks in the last like 10 years because they're all aging out and it's all
Well,
happening.
because they sold their homes and now they have to become compliant.
Yeah.
And again, if you haven't owned your home for a whole long time and now you've got to sink $40,000 into your septic, if I have to put that much into my septic, I don't have money now to build that unit for my parents to live at my house.
No, 100%. And I know that the ADU law is unevenly lookable across the Commonwealth, right? In the communities I represent, 30% of constituents don't have water sewer hookup, right? Or fully septic and well. And that is an unevenness about that. So we have to look for ways in which that unevenness is matched by other kind of state funds, right? Because not every fix or not every proposed benefit in the housing bond is going to apply to us here in Western Mass.
Well, and our problem out here isn't land. You know, in Boston, it makes sense for ADUs. Like, you don't have anywhere to put new houses. What are you gonna do? You're gonna put them in people's backyards. If the issue is finding a place to put a new house in Western Mass, we wouldn't have trouble. Like, we have plenty of places. There's plenty of subdividable lots. There's plenty of like ability to do that kind of a thing. Where we have the declining. We have people moving out of the country, and so yes, it's largely driven by housing, and if the housing situation is better, but I don't think that's what's going to solve it for us is the ADUs. Money being put into new construction in Western Mass, money being put into larger developments in population centers like Greenfield and Holyoke is what's going to bring more people into Western Mass, that kind of a thing. But anyways,
Right.
I'm
We
getting
need
on that thing.
businesses, we need transportation, we need economic development.
Yeah.
I really am paying attention to all of that, right? So everything from, economic development, bringing new industries in. I was able to get $30 million for UMass Food Science. And I think that'll lift everybody up, right? And I work not only on that, to the RTAs, going across county to the Northern Tier Rail, the Route 2 Rail, which I believe could be a generator, to really pushing HLC to both give us our fair share of the renovation and our fair share of the new build money that's out there. And it's different out here, right? We need nonprofit developers often to build because our for-profit developers generally are not going to be able to build at a scale that's going to pencil out for them, right? Just because we don't have, 200 units. We're not going to build 200 units someplace, where we could get the scale. And we might build 12 senior apartments and be delighted with that. But that's going to take public money to finish that balance sheet, a stack of public money.
Absolutely. Anything else from the board? Wonderful. Thank
For
you.
your service.
Absolutely.
Thanks for
And thank you for all you do.
Yeah, thanks for everything you're doing too.
And we'll,
Yeah.
we'll correspond about a multi-town meeting.
Yep.
It'll be
Thank you
fun.
for answering that question.
Oh, yeah, it's important. You have a too hard job as a community. And again, I love doing this work with them.
No, she's great.
She's a great person.
She is, absolutely.
So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Thank you very much.
Bye.
All right.
Joyce is in the waiting room, just so you know.
Oh,
Oh,
good to know, sorry.
Thank you. On that note, do we want to jump to the South County stuff so we don't make our guests wait longer?
no, she's good.
Any objection to that?
No, no, no.
All right. In order to not make you sit here and listen to us do a bunch of other things, we're going to jump to you. As much as I'm sure you love to sit here and listen to us talk about support for Hadley Bridge Grant. But anyways, so thank you for joining us today. Let me get my paperwork ready.
Where are we? There we
We are discussing the South County Senior Center three-town updated memo of understanding.
The intermunicipal agreement, yes.
Yes.
So last time it was enacted was 2009 and executed in 2010. It's been more than 15 years and it's supposed to be reviewed every 5 years, maybe max 10 years. So we're 10 years, sorry, Joyce. So we're at that point where the Board of Oversight has been meeting. I'd say we've been reviewing it for almost a year,
Yeah.
off and on since the spring of last year. And we collected data. Unfortunately, my predecessor did not really keep accurate records as to usage data in the My Senior Center data collection system, which we use. We've been able to really take good record, or collect good record data back to at least 2022 when I started. We've also learned a little bit more about the system, so we've been able to really update the information as much as possible. Based on the percentages that went over, Joyce, do you have your spreadsheet handy on your screen or no?
Do you need to be,
Yeah, I have it, but am I allowed to share?
Yeah, she,
1 second up? Oops, sorry.
So one of the things that we did was we took the usage data and the population based on the federal census data. So, and the federal census data, we went back to, I believe, 2000. We couldn't go back. Was it 2000 or 19? We couldn't get 1990
There you go,
data.
Joyce.
I think we just got back to 2000. So we had 2000, 2010, and then 2020 data. So basically 30 years. Joyce is sharing her screen now, so I can better give you information. Prior to being in the past few years, we could have really called it, as people have shared, the Deerfield Senior Center because it was mostly Deerfield residents attending. In the data collection, which is down below on the blue lines, usage stats, you could go back to 2020 is when we really started collecting some of that data. 2022 for me, so 65.1%. Sorry, could you make that a little bigger, please? Thank you. So Deerfield's data, 2022, 65.1%. Are we looking at population data on that one or usage? This is just population.
This is mostly the population data.
Okay.
The usage stats are on a different page, but I put the summary of the usage stats at the bottom
So
of the blue.
the blue.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't following that, just to make sure I was right. So the population in 2020 or 2000, 57.3 of our 60 and older population, and that's where the state comes up with the calculation for how they distribute formula fund grant monies. And right now, I think we're getting, right now this fiscal year, we're supposed to be getting $16 per older adult. Back then it was like $9 or less per older adult, and that just generated up. So in 2000, 57.3% of those in Deerfield were 60 and older. 2010, 57%, and then 54.1% was the 2020 census data. So we had a bit of a drop off, not by much. We've kind of maintained the same 54%, or around the same percentage, 55 give or take. Right now, 54.1. For Sunderland in 2000, we had 26.1%. In 2010, 26.2%. And in 2020, it increased slightly to 27.9% of our population in Sunderland being 60 and older. For Whately, that was 16.6%, 16.9%. It's up to 18% for 60 and older within the community. Just for number-wise, as you can see in the yellow up top a little bit for non-total 3 towns, the total 3 towns is 3,027. The number for Deerfield right now is 1,639. For Sunderland right now is 844. You'll see it jumped from the 2010 census data from 557 to 844, so you had a bit of an increase. And for Whately, we're at 544, up from 359 in 2010. Please note that, sometimes the state is a little slow at giving, or the federal government, I won't say the state, the federal government is slow about 2 years, maybe even 3, for getting that data to the communities. So when the state age, which is now the aging, just to share where that is. Now for usage stats, from the other tab, in 2022 is when we really started collecting that information. I know you probably want to focus strictly on Sunderland, but I'd like to cover all 3. So we had 65.1% of the youth participants or members of the center were from Deerfield in 2022. In 2023, that dropped to 60.3% because we've grown the membership, and now Deerfield's at 57.7% of usage data. And Sunderland in 2022 was, I think that's 29.6%, and then up to 32.6%. Now we're at 30.6%, so the average is 31.8%. Is that a 6 or an 8? I think that's a 6. You can tell I need new glasses. Thank you. So for Whately in 22, it was 5.3%, 23, 7.1%, and in 24, 11.7%. The mean is 9.4%. So the majority of the usage has always been Deerfield, but since we've migrated to the 3 towns and had our current main location in Sunderland, we've increased numbers here. Now, you may be curious as to why it's a little less in 24, because our numbers, our membership numbers are high. I think we had about 573 active members through the whole center for the last fiscal year. So, that number could give or take based on where we were the past couple of weeks with our annual picnic. But we've increased membership here in the town, and if we went by this for usage data, Whately would only be paying 8%, Sunderland would be paying 30.9%, and Deerfield would be paying 61%. If we went with, based on usage. Over the course of the conversation with the Board of Oversight members, one of the discussions has been what is to make it the most easiest on the town staff. Are the clerks able to get their accurate information back in a timely fashion in order to move forward with annual budget season? Because when you send out your census, some people send it in late, some people don't send it in at all. So you're kind of the consistent data has always been based on the federal census. Now mind you, some people could say, well, certain people aren't sending it in, a variety of factors. But while I understand Frontier utilizes the system for, usage, the number of older adults in our 3 towns is only increasing, and it's scheduled to be by 2035 around 37% of our entire population. Now in Deerfield, that's a higher number than maybe Whately because of the number of people who live in the community percentage-wise. But overall, this is how it was determined, and it's kind of been trending this way for a while with the amount of participants and the amount of residents. So I will leave all of the detailed questions, whatever else you want to ask, but Joyce probably has some good insight to that. But it was based on when you would get the data from your town clerks, would it be as accurate as the federal census data? The federal census data goes for 10 years, and our funding that we get from the state for the Formula Fund grant only comes out every 10 years. The dollar amount that the state decides to put towards that per person dollar amount may fluctuate annually. It's been going up for the past few years because there have been at $9, $12. I believe my first year on board, it was at, we went from 12 to 14 from the state. This fiscal year that just ended, it was at 15, and now we're asking for 16 through the Mass Council on Aging. And that has gone through both the House and the Senate for the state legislators to be going through as long as the governor signs the annual budget and there aren't additional cuts. But as you may or may not be aware, our aging service access points in Franklin County is LifePath. There have been a lot of funding cuts to different programs that the ASAPs are offering due to state and federal cuts. So what that means for us as senior center is now we're getting more people coming in, potentially seeking out services and referrals that they may not have before because they were working with the ASAP. And unfortunately, Meals on Wheels is being flat funded in the federal budget. As we all know, flat funding is not a cut, but it kind of is because it's not your expenses, your cost of goods to provide those meals to your older adults, is increasing, and everything here is kind of staying same with the flat funding. And also right now, depending on where that big beautiful bill goes, the dollar amount in there for the low-income heating assistance program is not there. They've canceled that. So a lot of people are going to be looking for additional resources within the community. And that's where we've seen a lot of people coming in to look for support.
So just in a nutshell, right now, the agreement's 50, 25, 25.
Correct.
And we're looking to go 54.1, 27.9, 18? Based on
Joyce, was it 54, 28, and then
Yes.
18?
Yeah, 54, 28.
Yeah, the numbers that are in the bright green,
Yeah.
Okay.
54.1 for Deerfield, 27.9 for Sunderland, and 18 for Whately. So it would be going up a little bit in Sunderland. It would go up more if we went with usage statistics.
Yeah.
But I think the usage statistics are gonna, they change. So year to year, they change a bit. To some extent, we're getting better and better at taking data. Just the outreach that Jen and the group have done over there to get people from all the towns involved has also had a big effect. But I feel like to me, the important reason to use census data rather than usage statistics is basically that it's going to be stable. It's very easy to plan with that. That's the first reason. Second reason, the usage statistics with time are converging so that they're going to match up. And I'm from Whately, so if I look at Whately's, we went from 5.3 to 11.7, and then as soon as Jen gives me the data for fiscal year 2025, which ends today, right?
Where's that data?
And at some point, we're gonna get to 18, and your usage relative, right, is gonna get down closer to 28, and so on. And our population numbers are changing slowly, in terms of percent or two per decade, and I think that's easier for us to plan for, as we try to put our budgets together every year. So those are kind of the two big reasons the board went with recommending we use the census data rather than the awesome data that Jen has been collecting. We would still keep collecting that data, by the way. There's no reason not to. It helps us get grants, and it helps us see, are we kind of meeting the needs of people in the various towns as well.
What are the age groups based on?
60 and older.
60 and older?
Yes.
Okay.
Although we provide support to anyone 55 and older or anyone who has a disability who's younger for services and supports.
So it's based on 60?
60, yes. That's the federal census data. That's how the state calculates it, and that's where we've been keeping it.
Can I
Yeah,
just,
it's not terribly different if you did the census with 50 and older. So I mean, the difference is small enough that it's not important.
can I just see the data for the age groups outside of the 50 and 60?
Oh, yeah, there is.
Yeah, I just want to see that 20 to 30. I can't.
There it is. So we got some of it down.
Wow, we went down a huge chunk.
Yeah, just
It's
that.
funny, Deerfield up, way down, then we get to college.
Yeah, so the 30 to 34 I'm fine with, but that 20 to
2024
2024 with,
is going from 700 to 500.
The
yeah.
apartment's getting older, or that's funny?
No, I mean, it's, that,
Honestly, I wonder if it's more people who are keeping their registration at home for voting purposes now than they were in the past. Because students living in Sunderland have a choice about whether they want to be registered and have this be their
I don't know.
permanent address. But yeah, I would be interested also to dig
well,
into
it's just,
the
you know, just looking at that, you know, because when I look at this Sunderland population, look how big that 20 to 25 is.
yeah.
It's like the largest number.
Yeah,
And-
this is the
that
federal
reflects it.
census data.
I'm sorry?
I think that reflects exactly what you're saying.
Well, I do too. I do too.
Myself.
I just find it really hard to believe we have,
Well, this is crazy that this one down to there and this one way up to. It's a big-
exactly.
That's a big jump.
Well, look at the 0 to 4 is
Yeah.
almost dropped in half on 189 to 106. Every category under 24.
Yeah, Deerfield down too, so, yeah. It's just wild.
Yeah, but it's that 20 to 24 with the amount of students and apartments and 116 flats being new, that is even more students in apartments in that 20 to 24 age group.
Yeah, but that was 2020
This
though.
is
It-
2020,
the
that
flats
was
wouldn't have been
elected.
opened by then.
That's right, that's true.
This is still lagging a
Before
little
that.
behind. And honestly, I wonder if the 2021 is just completely messed up because students were not on campus that year
COVID.
for COVID and were the I don't remember, were the apartment complexes empty? I don't remember.
Yeah.
Anyways, so
I mean, you look at everybody else's age group, 20 to 24, and it goes up. And ours just drastically drops, and
It's probably kids went home, I don't know.
Well, that was during COVID, so that's going to skew all your data.
well, and also my experience has been that over the 20-something years I've been in town, the apartment complexes used to be all students.
Right.
And now there's a lot more families and low-income people who are living in apartment complexes because there's not a lot of other options around. So I wonder if a big part of that is seeing that shift also from the early 2000s to the 2020s. So
I
back to
don't
the
know. It
genius.
seems like there's a lot less students. Even, you know, in the morning when I drive by, in the evening at Cliffside.
Yeah, I mean, I lived at the Sugarloaf Estates for years, and I was living there as a young family with kids, and most of my neighbors were young families with kids, whereas when I had lived there 15 years prior, when I was going to UMass as a 21-year-old, it was just all college students, all parties, all the time, constantly. And so I really feel like there's a demographic shift that's probably being.
And they built a lot more housing too.
Also true.
Down in Amherst, yeah.
But back to the money.
Back to this.
Inherently, I don't disagree with the way it's being done. I think that the 28% sounds reasonable, especially with the usage numbers. My big concern is just timing wise. We've already allotted the money for the year, so just want to make sure that this would be going into effect for next year's
Yes,
fiscal
for
year.
fiscal 27, because
Beautiful.
we have to get approval from all 3 select boards
Yep.
to move forward.
Yep.
We're also, I believe it's out at legal, Joyce, correct, being reviewed?
Say again?
I believe
I didn't quite catch what Jen asked.
I believe it's in legal to be, it's currently being reviewed by one of the law firms for one of the towns?
Yes, Pete said that it needs to be looked at by council. So the stats in the other towns, it says they've all discussed it, they all have asked me questions about the numbers as you're doing tonight. And they've all put off voting because even if like they would have voted in favor of it as it is, they thought, well, we're just gonna have to vote again if council changes some of the words. So they have just put it on hold until we hear back from council. And this is probably the week that every council is, I don't know, at the beach or something. It is summertime, so I didn't really expect I was gonna hear back from them in time for this meeting. But I would think, within a couple of weeks, we should have it back. I don't expect it to be controversial. I do expect that they'll find a reason to change something. But I think the agreement makes sense for all the towns, and I don't think it's a heavy lift for any of us, to be honest.
No, in general, I like the idea of it being population-based rather than usage-based, because that incentivizes the towns to encourage their residents to use something we're already paying for, rather than incentivizing towns to not encourage their residents to use it because it costs us more money when they do so. And so, I think that it sort of philosophically, I agree with that method for that reason as well. Is there any other questions from the?
I was just gonna note the only other change was adding in, we're gonna be able to appoint the second person for the
So
oversight.
I'm not, could you tell me what line item or paragraph that is, Joyce?
Four.
Yep.
So what was discussed was, currently the Board of Oversight is made up of one representative who is a select board member from each of the 3 towns. At this stage, it was suggested to appoint someone, so have on the board either a select board member or someone the select board appoints to take the, select board member's place. So say like Joyce decides she's not running anymore and she still wants to be a part, they could appoint her to do that.
Okay.
The other change is adding a senior center participant from each of the 3 towns in an advisory capacity to the board.
So that'd be a non-voting
Yes,
member? Okay.
non-voting,
Gotcha.
but, to make recommendations and other things and suggestions about where they might like to see the senior center go. The reason being non-voting at this point in time is, going back the 10 years when this the Board of Oversight was created, there were issues with different groups or factions that were looking to have the position of the senior center director eliminated and go to an all-volunteer senior center. There was just a lot of chaos. And if you're curious some more, I can drop off papers for you to read. But to just basically give people a voice, but not to give them the unilateral decision-making where it would create a lot of conflict or cause issues with finance and other pieces.
So, at the most basic level, I am not in favor of number 4. Because not having a select board member, having a designee, does not get the information back to the town.
Oh, no, it says one member, but then it's adding a second person.
No, it says,
But-
or their designee.
Oh, or their designee.
No,
So I believe it has to be run like other regional ones, and I'll use South County EMS. There is a select board member from each town that participates and a citizen at large from each town. But I don't believe it's a good idea not to have a select board member on it and to designate someone else. and I would be 100% against
What was
that.
that?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Crystal. What I would say to that is Sunderland would never be forced to pick a designee. Sunderland would always be able to put one of their select board members on there. That would always be the option. Some other towns don't have quite as many people available to take all these volunteer positions. So one of the towns asked for the flexibility to be able to do that, to be able to put in a designee.
I understand, but I'm still going to be
And
against
I
it.
agree with you about it being a really good idea for it to be a select board member. I don't think it should just be anybody who steps up to volunteer. I think a better example would be if you guys needed him to, would you be comfortable with Tom Feidenkepis being on the board of oversight?
As a member at large, yes.
Right.
But
So in
not-
each town, there may be
Not
people
in
like that.
place of a select board member.
I agree.
Yeah. So you would never have to, Sunderland would never have to put in a designee.
That's fine, but you say that today, we don't know who the next select board, anything like that, and like I said, I'm 100% against it. Not being a select board member.
What do you think, Nathaniel?
No, honestly, I agree that it should be a select board member on the.
And I have no problem with adding a member
Yeah.
at
But
large.
should we be
I
dictating what
don't,
other
yeah,
towns do?
the flip side is that I don't know that I have a problem with Whately or Deerfield having a non-select board member. If their town wants to have that communication breakdown on their end, hey, that's their prerogative. But I do also see your point about it opens the door for who knows what's gonna happen in the future and, you know.
Correct.
Yeah.
Just because we say today Sunderland doesn't have to, Sunderland can always have it.
Yeah, could it-
Becky's not gonna be here 25 years from now. Dan's not, I'm not, you might still be on the select board, but hopefully me and Dan by then have had
I guess here's a
the
question.
ability to
is,
retire.
I know that for other things, like for when we have a contract with the Frontier teachers, for example, or I guess a better example is the elementary school teachers. We negotiate as a block, but there is a separate contract from the town of Sunderland to our teachers, the town of Deerfield to our teachers, and the town of Whately to our teachers. Could we have the Sunderland contract not have designee in it, the other two have designee in it, or is that gonna open up way more problems than it is worth?
I don't know that you can do that in one IMA that everyone signs. But let me make like one more pitch. For a long, long time, we had no board of oversight for our senior center. And things didn't go very well at all. And I think for the last 10, 15 years, having 3 selectmen on the board of oversight has been really, really important for that board to be effective. So I completely get what Crystal is saying about that. But our senior center is also changing. We have 3 full-time staff members who are so much more successful at making our senior center work than it's ever been in the past when we had part-time directors and 5 or 6 hours a week helper. Our senior center itself has changed. And I think it's still important to have a lot of select board involvement, but I also think that select boards are having more and more pressure to do more and more things. And if we can give some towns a little bit of flexibility on choosing someone who would be as effective as a selectman to do that job, then I think we would want to give towns that ability. The senior center itself is changing, and all to the good, and all because of, the person who's there in front of you in person. And I think I'm okay with giving us that little bit of flexibility. That's my last pitch on that.
Yeah. And I would propose adding a member at large, keeping a select board, and in addition to that, adding a member at large, make that Board of Oversight a little bigger, get a little more diverse input. But, yeah, I mean, that's my opinion.
Yeah, would you say you want like another member at large who may or may not be a senior center member?
Correct.
So a 9-person board with 2 voting members and 1 non-voting member.
The members at large are voting members.
I think you're running into too much conflict by adding too many voting members to the board. I've looked at the data from before, I've spoken with.
I mean, I'm on South County
seniors on that.
or I'm on South County EMS, and that's how they do. They have a select board member, a member at large, and they have non-voting financial,
So it's 3 from each, 3 from each?
2 from each.
Oh, 2, okay.
And then Deerfield sends a financial, which is a non-voting member, but, you know, that comes to it. But there are 6 members that are voting members. And I mean, that would be the same here with 3 select board, 3 members at large. And then the member at large, if the select board member is not able to attend for some reason, that's, you know, someone that can fill them in on information, you know.
I mean, I guess that could be an alternative, is keep the 6-member thing and have it be a voting select board member, a non-voting senior, except the non-voting senior is an alternate. So if the select board member can't attend because the town's unable to field the select board member, you'd be able to pass those voting rights on to the other member.
That's getting more and more and more complicated.
That definitely,
Agree?
Yeah.
With that on people?
I can make it more complicated.
I like it simple, keep it simple,
Yep.
keep it simple.
Would we talk about that?
So, do we have to do this tonight? Or do we want to wait for council and then we can kick it around one last time?
Yeah, let's wait till we hear back from council, as Joyce mentioned, and then that way we'll know exactly what we're talking about, because town council might have a problem with 4 that we didn't even think about, and it gets fundamentally changed in a way that we, you know, need to react to. And then we can have a chance to mull over more ourselves, and then we can discuss it at a future meeting.
Can I just ask a question of the board?
Yes.
It sounded like your main issue is the fact of failure for communication.
Yes.
So if you implemented in the IMA that, like, for example, for me, I send information and updates to Becky or to Jeff. So,
no one's gonna change my mind. I truly believe a select board member needs to be on the Board of Oversight.
so what's the difference though when you talk about having a person at large? They're not necessarily going to communicate all that information to the select board, even if they're on the board. I've seen failure in
Okay,
that
so
person.
right
Just
there,
asking.
you just stated that a non-select board member won't communicate information.
But as a paid staff person, I communicate
Okay.
regularly.
All right.
So if you included that in the IMA, I'm curious as to why that would be an issue, I guess.
Well, because we had an issue not too long ago where there was a change of hours of someone who was employed, and it never got communicated to the board. And all of a sudden, the first we heard about it, and I'm sorry.
That was me as a select board.
I know, and that's what I'm saying. If that happens with a select board member, how does somebody who's not a select board member communicate that to it, right?
Yeah.
And it's also
And I'm not trying to
I understand.
say anything wrong about
Yep.
what happened. It happened. That was the first we heard about it. We were all shocked. We learned a lesson, but now we learned from that, right?
Yeah.
It's also
And-
not just that direction, it's also the other direction as well, is that it's important for somebody on that board to also know what we're going through as a town
To know what our
financially and whatnot.
budgets
So
are,
that when
things like
discussions are
that.
happening, the person, I mean, because somebody else might be like, oh yeah, sure, that sounds great, let's throw more money at that. Whereas that's sort of why you have a select board member on all these boards, is so that that person is not just a voice to bring information back to the select board, but also a voice to be able to be like, hey, we're hitting 20% on our healthcare this year, we can't afford that. And that's why in fundamental, I agree that it should be a select board member. And I guess the question would be, really what we're talking about is Sunderland's comfort on this. Can we as Sunderland pass a resolution that the three of us do that says that regardless of whether the senior center allows it or not, we are going to choose to constrain ourselves in a way that makes us happy, and then whatever the other towns do, whatever they do their own thing. Because I completely agree that for Sunderland, I want to lock this down, but I don't want to necessarily preclude the other two towns from being able to do what they want to do. That's my thing, is that like I completely agree for us. I just don't want to tell Joyce what to do. I don't want to tell, Deerfield what to do.
And I guess what I'm hearing too is something that maybe we should be considering as the Board of Oversight. If there is a communication problem between the BOO and the select boards, then maybe we ought to be thinking about ways to make that communication stronger, even outside of the board composition. And, maybe that's something we can talk about at our next meeting, next week under items not anticipated. Or maybe
And I apologize, Jen, I didn't.
No, it's fine, it's
use
fine,
that
it's
as
fine. It's me first time through
Correct.
and figuring that out, so
And
I
that's
totally
why
take
I
that.
have this.
Yep.
So let's do this. It sounds like we all have some thinking to do and some discussion and whatever. We will brainstorm ideas of how to make this palatable for Sunderland. And we'll be able to get back to you with what we're proposing in that respect. Again, whether it's as a town we make a resolution that constrains ourselves, in that respect, or whether it's we're insisting on language changes, we will come up with that, in the future. Is there any discussion on 6 though, or are the board all in the same position
fine
that
with-
we're good with the 28% as long as we're talking about for 27 as
Fiscal
well?
27,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, 6 sounds good. 4, we will get back to you if we have any ideas of how to make that more palatable.
Great. Just so you know, our next Board of Oversight meeting is Monday, the 7th. Is it the 7th, Joyce? Next Monday.
Yep,
I'll just
okay.
leave it.
Yep.
After the long weekend, yep.
So, and if we hear anything from legal, which we probably will not this week, we'll make sure to forward that over to Becky.
Beautiful.
So she can share it with you.
Great.
Thanks for coming in. Thanks, Joyce, for coming too.
Thank you, Joyce.
Thank you very much. Have yourself a good one.
Thank you, Jen.
Alrighty, so we kind of bounced around a little bit on our agenda. We're gonna go back up to authorization from Select Board for Police Chief to accept a municipal bid to sell the 2010 Crown Victoria. Now, just to remind everyone, regularly we have surplus machinery in town where the police station decides that the vehicle is no longer worth the money to maintain, and the town sells that excess capital. And the way we usually do that is through a system called Municipid, which is an online bidding system where you put the item up, people bid on it. It's been how we've been doing it forever and a half.
There's a picture of the beauty there for you.
Yes.
The Crown Vic. I
People
couldn't
love these
believe it
things.
was a Crown Vic.
I love these
It
things.
It is.
An old car. So this is a very sort of a formality more than anything, but I figured it was important to give a little bit of context. So on that note, any discussion, or can we move to a motion?
Let them get rid of it.
All right, I would entertain a motion to authorize the police chief to accept a municipal bid to sell our 2010 Crown Victoria.
I motion that we allow the chief to accept a bid to sell a 2010 Crown Victoria.
And I happily second.
All right, we have a motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
I,
Aye. 3-0. Thank you very much. Moving on, next up we have a review letter to Hadley in support of the bridge grant. And we have that in front of us. Hadley reached out to us, the town administrator of Hadley reached out to us asking for a letter of support. They are going to be doing bridge and culvert work near 388 River Drive in Hadley, which is Route 47. And given that Route 47 is one of the main thoroughways leading in and out of our town, they figured it was good for us to both be aware and also to get our buy-in on that. Sorry.
I just want to clarify that. They're not doing the work at this point. They're only applying for a grant to do the work.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think
Okay,
that,
no, that's all right. They're two very different things.
Very
They're-
different things, but yeah, we're supporting that grant application in order
Yes.
to secure the funding for that.
and I believe they have to start with the engineering. I don't think they have the engineering done, so.
Yeah. Oh,
It's,
yeah.
it's gonna be a ways, and I think
I
they
won't even
probably.
be alive when it's done.
I won't be alive when it starts.
Have hope,
Hopefully,
people, have hope.
yes. Yeah, I saw a culvert, the bridge over the Lake Wyola bypass. It took 12 years to get it done.
Yeah, they'll be having to give me that cane.
But it got done, it got
There you
done.
go.
Any discussion about that? I know we had mentioned that we wanted to make sure that all of our town services, fire, the South County EMS, police, and everything like that were well aware, so there's no surprises. Outside of that, is there any discussion that we wanted to have on this?
I'm good.
And
so-
I actually got the communication from our police chief. Our fire chief has written his own letter and shared that. It was in the drive. And Crystal has reached out to the EMS director, so they all are aware at this point, which is wonderful.
Just, we always want to make sure that they're always in the know about these things. All right, any other discussion about the letter? All right, in that case, I would entertain a motion to approve and send the letter.
A motion to approve and sign the letter for the culvert replacement in Hadley.
Second,
All right, motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
aye.
Aye, 3-0. Thank you very much. All right, next up is our Aponte and Aponte contract for continuing accounting services for the year FY '26. They have been our accounting service for 3 years now, I think.
They began in '23.
So,
23, 24, 25, so we're going into our fourth year.
okay, yeah. They've done a fantastic job on not just getting us back to a good place in terms of our old accounting books and all that stuff, but they've been, from where I'm sitting, doing a great job so far. So I don't have any real concerns there. Anything to,
The amount is the same as last year.
okay. Any concerns or questions from the board?
No.
And there was,
Yeah, please.
Is that the same one that the notices we got about the new tax bills? The real estate tax is going to be combined with the water tax in one bill? Are you aware of that? Treasurer
Okay, so-
talked to her
Yes,
today.
so,
that is a result of transitioning software from a software that is now no longer can be upgraded or maintained
Okay.
to going with Vadar software, which has a very good reputation in Massachusetts with a lot of municipalities using it. It's the software that Aponte was currently using before they started with us. And it will be cohesive in using that software that our treasurer, accountant, and assessor will all be using the same software. So we won't have as many breakdowns between software units as we had in the past.
But the issue is, and I checked with the bank, they don't care. The issue is, for example, mine, and I'm sure other people's, I've talked to other people, their mortgage and their escrow is just based on their real estate tax. You privately pay the water tax. And even the bank told me, well, if it's combined, and your escrow is gonna go up. And best thing you do with your escrow, this is the answer from the bank, is when it gets increased, then come back and just pay that monthly. So in other words, did you realize that was happening?
So the water bill's
So
gonna be
we
combined?
learned about this
Yeah,
this
the water
morning.
and real
Heather
estate's
was
gonna be
just
combined.
back
That's
from,
not- She said she talked to them more about it.
yeah, she was
I don't
reaching,
think we should be voting on any contract until it's straightened out.
well,
the
this
contract
is-
has nothing to do
yeah,
with this issue.
is two separate things
The contract
entirely.
is for software. This
No, the-
Make
company,
you aware of what's going
No, no,
on.
it's that the Aponte uses this same software. Our contract, the software is separate from Aponte. This approval has nothing to do with that software.
correct.
Yeah,
And we are working on a solution to get back to you.
Yeah.
We hadn't yet been able to talk to Vadar or Aponte when he
So
was here this morning.
my tax, and I guess because I need to understand this too as a
Yes.
taxpayer,
Of course.
my tax bill now is gonna include my water bill?
Yep,
Yes.
It's gonna be one bill. I will not get separate bills?
Correct.
not usage, water tax. You won't get a separate bill.
What about common land, all that? Will that still be a separate bill?
All in the same one.
Common land, I don't know how that's taxed. I'm sorry. But I know,
Well,
but it's
right.
not both of your water bills. It's not the
Correct, but-
usage.
Again, I think we
And,
need to understand the huge picture here, because like, we have common land.
Yep.
There's a lot of places in town that have common land. For example, if I had a mortgage company that was holding money in escrow, they never held money for the common land. I always had to pay that separate.
Or the water in my case, like I said.
Yeah.
Right, and the water also.
Yeah.
Though, because they all came as separate bills, the only thing that was held in escrow was my property tax for that one. All that common land, all that other stuff was all separate bills. That could,
I think that will continue to be separate bills.
okay,
That's good.
That's not what I was told, Lieutenant.
The common land piece?
No, anything like that, it's all combined into one.
No, there was only the one that was added,
Which is the water.
the
So
water.
it sounds like what we need is more information, so.
Yeah, we
Yes,
do.
Please
and
reach out to
that's
Vadar.
what, yeah.
Yes.
I
Line
will
up for
get
next time. We
Yeah,
do
oh,
this.
Put it
yeah.
on the agenda for the next meeting, but we are working on it.
Okay, yeah.
I know
talked to
Heather
the
was
tax
a little-
collector, She said, well, ask your bank how, maybe they can split it up. And the bank said, no, we don't care.
no,
Yeah.
They're not gonna do that.
the bank ain't gonna, nah.
They don't care one way or the other.
No, they'd rather send you the fine for being
She said she did
low
tell me
on
that
your
tax
escrow.
collector said She had a lot of people with issues like that.
She had a couple of phone calls before he got there.
So yeah, we will get more information. At this point, I don't know what to tell you other than where
You gotta talk
we
to
are.
Monty and see what
Yeah.
they can do about it.
Well, again,
Aponte
Ponte has nothing to do with
can't
it.
do
They don't,
anything about it.
they're not offering the software. This is a third-party software they happen to use.
That's why.
Well, yeah, because they're our accounting
Right.
company,
But
yeah.
they're the ones who gotta straighten up.
No, not them. It coming with their name on it, but it's not, it's on our behalf that they're sending it to you. And it's because we are choosing the software, not because they use the software. But anyways, that's a whole other conversation. That being said, since the Aponte contract is separate from this issue, are there any discussion about renewing this contract, or are we good? All right, at that time, I will entertain a motion to approve the contract for year 26 for Aponte, for our accounting services.
I motion we approve the contract for Ponte for 2026 for accounting services.
Second.
All right, we have a motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. 3-0. All right, we already did the South County. Last up is our review of the final appointment list. And we have that in front of us as well.
So we don't have to do all of these, right? We did a whole bunch of them. Do we know which are the ones on here that we have to do still?
So there's the building inspector.
Yeah, the building
Sure.
inspectors and the alternatives and the wiring
And
In-
plumbing,
and plumbing and wiring inspector and alternatives.
okay, those are the only ones that we had to do?
I did want to note that I identified our super RAOs. An RAO is somebody that handles a public records request. And the super RAOs were appointed back in 2016 when the law changed, when the state legislation changed the public record process. They instituted super RAOs. And they are officially our town clerk, myself, and our police chief.
Makes sense.
That makes total sense, yeah.
And you will not see Wendy listed here because she's elected.
Okay.
And she has that role through statute. And
So
then-
on here, I'm only seeing you listed as a super RAO. You're saying that Becky,
Yeah, and
Eric
then
is
Eric is
listed.
over here under police department.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And it says it on there, okay.
And there
Yeah.
was
Okay, thank you.
a correction in highway department. Let me find highway. The part-time person is new, so it's Kristen
Miller?
Miller, and not Holden, who had been there.
Gotcha.
And the other change was a member of, and we had a couple part-timers were taken off the police department list.
So the change.
And here's the plumbing and gas is Ronald Weatherby,
Yep.
and alternative is Dennis Spill.
All right, so we have to do each of these chunks separately, right?
Yeah.
All right, so on page 1, we need to deal with building inspector and assistant building inspectors. Is that correct?
Yes, there's 3 alternates for the building inspector.
Okay.
So do you just want a motion for each of these chunks then? Is that how we want to do this?
You can, yes, that's
Okay.
fine.
So I would entertain a motion.
All right, I motion, we're appointing these people. We appoint Tom Quinlan as building inspector, assistant building inspector, Mark Snow, Louis Hasbrook, and Ron Lauren.
Second.
All right, motion made and seconded.
I guess my concern is
Or,
you did
What's
not
the
vote
wording?
last time. I don't believe you voted anybody last
The
time.
whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a question.
I thought we voted on everything we could and the ones we didn't
We
know.
reviewed them all, but I
Okay.
don't believe
All right.
they were voted. as-
Yeah. To be honest, I'm
Then-
comfortable with just voting it as a slate.
I
if
am
that's
too,
Fine.
then.
The one question I had before we got to voting on the whole thing as a slate was just, and this is not really something we need to change or anything like that, but just brought it up. We now have 2 vacancies in the capital planning committee. I'd like to look to fill those. I know that Rock has expressed that he's not coming back this year. We're down to 4 people on that board, and I'd love to see 5 or 6. So
Yeah.
as a side note, if we can figure out what those vacant seats requirements are, whether they're just at large or whether they're from specific committees, and then if we can get those committees, if there are from specific committees, if we can get those committees to appoint someone, that'd be great.
Okay.
But anyway, sorry, that was just an aside. Any questions on any of this before we move to a motion? Beautiful. At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve,
Could I just bring up one, I'm sorry.
not at all, please.
Council on Aging.
Yes.
I have not, I don't believe they've had a meeting, the 2 people that are still here. For, at least since November,
Okay.
since I started. I just want to flag a concern about reappointing people that might not be able to meet. And I think this might be the case with the 2 members listed here on the Council on Aging.
Okay.
I would maybe recommend that I should contact them and find out if they're interested in continuing service. We had reached out to all the committees and boards. Mel has done a lot of emailing and calling people. But we did not hear back from these folks, and I just want to
Should we
flag
pause
it.
that one?
Yeah, if
Yeah,
we
we
could
can-
do all but that. I'm not, it's
Yeah, no,
your
I-
decision, I just,
No, I agree. I guess the question is, if we can't get a hold of the current people, do we find new people? Like, how does that, I guess that's the question is.
Well, we could have Jen, maybe, well, Jen could help us, somebody could help us.
And that is sort of part of my other question is, how necessary is the Council of Aging, given that we have a robust South County Senior Center with a Board of Oversight for it? Is that already doing what we want that council to do, or do we need to have a separate Council of Aging? To be honest, I don't know what the Council of Aging does
Yeah.
outside of.
I
senior
guess they
center stuff.
haven't been doing anything.
Well, so, that's fair.
But typically, they would be representative of your group of seniors. I know there are people that have become active. I had that meeting with a small group of people from South County, but there is some financial support that comes from the state, and they might be able to. I don't know, maybe I should start by talking with the volunteer, a couple of volunteers that we do have and get their input.
Okay, I mean, if you can get a hold of LaDonna or Marianne, about it, great. If not, bring it back to us in 2 weeks and
Yeah,
we'll go from
because
there.
we could always do this later if it's not
Yeah.
done today.
But yeah, I agree on that. So let's do a motion for everything except for Council of Aging, and
Okay.
that should cover us.
I motion we accept the appointments as presented in this document, with the exception of Council on Aging.
Second?
All right, we have motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 3-0. Thank you, and we will
Thank you very much.
take care of that last one when we
Yeah.
have a chance to. All right. I see we have a scope of work thing here, but I don't see that on the agenda. Is that, am I
I'm
missing
sorry,
that?
what is that?
What?
Did I give you something, a stray back?
That's the.
That's the
Aponte.
agreement with
Aponte.
Aponte.
Oh, that's a Ponte, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're good.
For some reason, I thought that was
They
the,
don't have a header on it. It's very odd.
there we go, never mind. I just want to make sure I wasn't missing something more than that. I know we had talked about, the old school situation, and so I was just making sure we weren't missing something about that, so we're
Right.
on the right page.
Right.
All right, that is it for new business. Just double check, yep. Moving on to old business, we have review status of pickleball court CPA grant on our agenda.
So I just wanted to have a chance to talk to the select board. At this point, being wrapped up in the budget and getting my feet on the ground, I have not touched this project. And I wanted some guidance from you, whether this is something I should dig into, start to figure out where we're at, figure out what the next steps need to be. I know there was talk about getting some feasibility studies done on noise and whether any fencing was needed in the last proposed location, which is over near the abutters. Sorry. And,
Right, behind the parking lot.
yes.
Yep, that
And
was,
that was the last proposed location.
yep.
So I
It was,
just,
I believe from the studies and stuff, that was the only location that would keep it in Riverside Park.
Yeah, because anywhere else was too close to the river.
It was too close to the river. Yeah,
So my understanding of where we are on that is, we ran into a bunch of roadblocks that it was, we were no longer smooth sailing, and then right around the time we hit those roadblocks,
yeah, that's when Jeff left.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, and blah, 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 blah.
And then
And it's
Yeah.
it's
taken
kind
me
of
a
been
while
on
to
hold for the.
catch up to where he might have been.
Yeah, so if you can
Yeah.
get yourself up to speed on that, obviously we want to pick that up and keep moving on that. Just for history's sake, the original proposed site, which was just sort of mentioned, it was closer to the river, was kind of out behind the fields in a way that was going to be much further away from people. And so what the town voted on, what was approved, was with that location in mind. We're trying, or at least we had been trying, to figure out a way to salvage the proposal, because the money, the town meeting, article mentioned Riverside Park. So in order to try to keep it in Riverside Park and not have to go back to the town, we were seeing if we could make it work in that location over here. Once we shifted from being away from everybody to being right behind a bunch of people's houses, it went from something that was wildly being everyone was excited about, to all of a sudden some people were less than thrilled about it, and so it's now more of a contentious thing than it had been in the past, which makes sense. And so in some ways, we might have to go back to the proverbial drawing board in terms of locations, because it may just be that no matter how much we want it to, that the location back here may just not work for the town. So, but that being said, we can't make any of those decisions unless we kind of ramp back up in that. So yes, please do get yourself familiar with it. If you want any more information, please feel free to reach out to the board
And if-
members.
Yeah,
Or,
and if there's any I don't know if there was a construction estimate. I know there was,
I think 120,000
Yeah, we had an
is
estimate from
allocated.
right, but the problem with that estimate, and again, we need to see how close that estimate still is.
Right,
But the major problem, I believe, with that estimate, it was only 6-foot
The fencing.
fencing.
yeah.
oh, okay.
And 6-foot fencing is not tall enough if the need arises for sound barrier,
To be a sound barrier, yeah.
and we weren't even sure if 6-foot fencing was
Yeah.
adequate even without sound barrier.
Okay.
You know, that was something we wanted Jeff to talk to, because many of us in this room can reach 6 foot tall. And, you know, it just becomes something that could get, you know, again, because you got a ball field right there, you have kids around, you just don't want something that is really climbable,
Huh.
you know, for kids.
Yeah.
But again, we need something that in the event sound protection is required, can support it, right? We don't want to put up 6-foot fencing, tear it back down, and now we'll have to turn around and put up 14-foot fencing. It's a waste of money. We should at least,
Yeah, I also, one suggestion I have would be to reach out to the Shelburne Town Administrator and ask them about complaints about the one they've got up there.
To the mayor?
Shelburne
Shelburne.
Falls, they've got one in, kind of in the neighborhood.
You were invited there.
Yeah, I went and looked at it. I've been up there, yeah.
It's right, very close proximity, all the houses.
Yep,
Works very well.
So I'm just curious if what they've heard up there. That was my,
Okay.
if the town administrator's heard anything.
Okay.
do they have sound protection on that?
No, it's just chain link, right?
It's out now.
Nothing.
Most of the neighbors.
They probably all play, yeah.
So yeah, if you can engage with that, get
Yeah.
yourself up to speed, as I said, reach out to whoever you need to do
Oh, I
that.
wish I had known last week. I could.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I should have mentioned it.
The small town administrator meeting.
Yep.
But I will. I'll call them. Excellent.
All right,
Yeah.
6 feet.
Thank you. That's what I needed your guidance. I appreciate it.
no problem.
The
Yeah.
other thing I'd like to know is, I know one of them obviously, but the other ones, where they're actually written letters saying, no, we don't want it.
Yeah, we.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
We got
yeah.
letters, we got packets.
Yeah, we definitely, we got
Presentations,
information.
we've
Oh,
gotten
we
lots
had a
of,
presentation from 2022, that was Colorado and Arizona. We didn't know, you didn't know there was gonna be a presentation that night, so none of us in this room could have even counteracted that presentation.
oh, I'm not speaking to the content, I'm just
back to the-
answering the
what
question
we
that we have definitely
usually-
gotten responses.
There was
I'm
one,
just questioning if there's something that can be brought forward when the discussion comes back.
yeah, there was,
I didn't see any.
there was one in Mass too. I can't remember what town it was. There was one in Mass somewhere.
But yeah, definitely, when we get to a point where we're back on track,
Yep.
we will definitely have
Yep.
more public sessions to talk
I
about it
believe
further.
it's a 10-foot barrier is usually required, it's usually recommended 10, but 6 feet is too low. But I
Yeah,
think
so
it's
that's
usually-
exactly-
Well, that was what we were
It's like
talking about
10-foot barriers
last
usually
time was
recommended.
going up to 10.
Yeah, so my understanding was if it's gonna have sound, that sound barrier padding on it, if that ends up, and again, we need to check with somebody who truly knows this for sure, but for some reason, I was thinking it was either 12 foot tall that fencing needed to be in order to support the weight and stuff of that. But again, we need to just find that out for sure.
Sure.
Because I would hate to see anything built and then shut down over noise complaints and not have the ability to put up that sound barrier if need be.
Without spending redundant money that we,
Right.
pulling out concrete and putting in,
We gotta make sure we
yeah.
budget
No, I
whatever we
agree
do,
with
we
that.
have the money in that.
Yeah,
And I respectfully request that the stakes go back up to where it's supposed to be, you know, where they were attempted to be.
Oh, he said they mowed that day,
They said they mowed that day,
all the stakes down.
stakes are not, no longer there.
oh yeah, they're not there anymore.
I'd
Yeah.
like to see them there if that's possible.
I could probably lay
They're
it,
gonna,
I could lay that out if you,
could we use spray paint so they could continue to mow?
something,
I never saw them.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
That
mean,
was kind of weird, that, he said it was staked, and they just happened to mow the day of the meeting, and the stakes came down.
Yeah,
yeah, no, it had been staked out there for quite a while,
yeah. I'm an old surveyor, I could do that.
but, you know.
But we could use that spray.
Yeah, if we can paint it on there,
Yeah.
or at least paint the corners on it, that would probably be
Even
better
the chalk.
because,
Yeah, or that orange
well,
stuff that they use.
the
for-
trouble with stakes are kids,
Yeah,
They're fun to pull out of the ground and
You
torpedo.
gotta
and-
put flush
And
with
once
orange.
again, the courts aren't year-round, so, like, they're April to November courts, so, same as Frontier, you can't use them year-round, so.
Yeah.
I mean, they play tonight and then they're done. I mean, you can only play, this is sun, so you're only gonna play a couple hours and you're out of it. It's too hot. I just came from Amherst.
Okay.
Alrighty. Next up is select board updates. Crystal, do you have anything?
I
for us
got
to do?
nothing.
Dan, do you have anything?
Just as you know, the trails grants and are going in, so.
The only thing I have is just that the Franklin Tech community suffered a loss this last weekend. One of the members of the junior class was killed in Keene this past weekend. I just wanted to offer the town's condolences to the family and to all of the Sunderland students who attend, as well as the rest of the students and their families.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
It's always tough with kids.
It's been real hard for my kids, yeah. All right, town administrator updates. Becky, anything from you?
This is kind of, no, I mostly was just looking up and making sure we had passed the regulation to have remote meetings prior to our Zoom meetings, and we had. So even if we're having a phone meeting, we're still legitimate, even if it's not on Zoom. So I just went back to check that history. I'm going back through trying to make sure that our ARPA is as well defined as possible, given that, you know, things will be, there will be audits coming.
Of course.
And I have found that there's the reporting that went in for prior years, we reported in 22, 23, 24. I did the report for 25 in March. When I've gone back to match up my invoices to what we reported, not all the projects were the same, and there's some discrepancies. So I've been busy trying to resolve those issues. I just want you to know that's where part of my time is going, because I feel it's critical. We can't afford to lose any of that money. And the other, I wanted to be sure we brought it up. The VADAR transition has been handled very well by our financial staff, by our treasurer, has especially. She went to her first treasurer's conference this past week, which was particularly difficult to do, managing financial transition in software at the same time. But the bills all went out. They went out. Yeah, they're out. Everybody's receiving their bills, but all the bills got mailed out before the 30th. She was working on that goal for 2 months to be sure to make it with all the transition requirements. So I just wanted you to be aware that she's really worked hard to do that, as well as the accountants and our assessor clerk has learned a lot of new information to be able to do the transition as well. And that's the biggest thing on my list tonight.
Okay.
Alrighty. So
Any
we
small things on your list?
You want to see the list?
don't have time for that. What are you talking about? All right, so that's select board update, town administrator updates. Correspondence, the only item we had was the letter that we discussed already, so we don't need to go over that. Next up is public comment. Anything else from our...
Thank you very much for
Absolutely.
listening.
No, we appreciate you coming, and always happy to have members of the public come and talk.
I know, I was very Amherst.
I motion we adjourn?
Second.
We have a motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
8:18, take us out. Thank you very much. Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Recording stopped.